So thank you so much, everyone, for turning up. You can see the screen? Yes? Okay. So let's start with something really important. I'm going to ask 3 questions. It's a live survey, and I'm really interested in the results. First question, what kind of company would you do business with or work for? Option 1, where people look like me. Option 2, where I feel valued and understood. Would you say 1 or 2 in the chat? 2, 2, 2. Full agreement. So far, everybody, 2. Second question. Which one is a fundamental psychological human need? 1, diversity. 2, belonging. 2, 2, 2. We have full agreement. So 2. Okay. Last question. Which area of the D&I field involves over 90% of activities, tools, and measurable data? 1, diversity. 2, inclusion. Where most of the activities go, most of the tools. Inclusion. Claire, yes. I'm really curious to talk to those people who said 2. How many companies do you know where they measure inclusion? Much more than diversity. But I would like to go is 2. It's usually 1. Yes. Exactly. So usually that is 1. There's a quota. There are lots of pictures, but inclusion part, not so much. So you see, this highlights a huge gap between what people need, what they want, and what they actually get. So what is the result of that? One is that the burnout rate is up by 50% compared to the previous year in some segments of the company, age between 18 and 34, entry level and senior management, for example. That's not ideal. We can see that because people want something, they need something, but they get something else. Also, employee engagement has been plummeting more sharply than ever before. It's back to the level where it was more than 10 years ago. How come companies spend insane amount of money on programs, but the results are getting worse more quickly than before? And this just indicates that something is not right, something is missing. The need is there, the topic is important, but something doesn't work. So how can we create the right environment? And how can we develop the right skills to unlock this potential? Because clearly a lot of potential is lost. So would you like to see the future? We have big promises today. If you do, here it is. So we know that by 2030, there's going to be an 85 million shortage of employees, and that is going to be translated into $8.5 trillion in lost revenue. This is the maximum. So if you look at, for example, a healthy demographics, this is what it should look like. Lots of young people and a few old ones. That is healthy. But in some areas of the world, it's not like that. So if you look at, for example, the US and Europe, it's more like a Christmas tree, meaning that it's more and more difficult to find people, to attract and engage talent. And this is the maximum, not the minimum. We cannot just clone a bunch of 20 years olds. But in some areas like China and Japan, it's even more urgent. They're actively losing people every single day. It's not sustainable. It is predictable. Something has to be done. Attracting and engaging talent is getting exponentially more difficult. And clearly spending money on the same solutions is not working. So what can we do about that? Maybe AI can help us. But what is AI? Is it a solution or is it a threat? Artificial intelligence, at least officially. But that would imply that that is something that we designed and something that can help us to become more efficient. But according to Yuval Noah Harari, the historian and author, he's got a very different take on it. He thinks that it's more like an artificial intelligence, not in the sense of extraterrestrial, but it doesn't think like humans. And that can be scary. I don't know if you know the game Go, especially in Asia, it's really popular. Whole philosophies were built on it. It's been around for 2,500 years. Millions and millions of extremely smart people played it. There was nothing else to discover. That's what we thought until AlphaGo arrived. An artificial intelligence designed to play Go. Within hours, it defeated the human champion and made us realize that we discovered only a fraction of the possibilities of what Go was capable of. A fraction. The way of thinking was not human-like at all. It was completely different, unpredictable. So if you look at the different levels of AI, there is level one, which is technically fake news. That's not real. Pre-programmed machines. They look smart, but they are pre-programmed. There's not much thinking going on there. You can talk to a coffee machine and it can make you a coffee. Fantastic. That's not necessarily AI. But then imagine that you wake up in the morning, the coffee machine looks at you and says, "Oh, you look tired. Do you want an espresso?" That's more interesting. Now that's a bit scary. But if you really want to be happy or terrified, depending on your preference, imagine you wake up in the morning and the espresso machine says, "I made you a new coffee." I think you would love it. Now that's a whole new level because it's reinventing things. It's learning, it's designing, it's independent. That is the highest level. But if they're really smart, what about the empathetic side of AI? Let's see. Is it possible that, AI is smarter than us, but we have a superpower, which is empathy? Let me tell you something. No, we lost that game as well. This is what Google wanted to understand. Is AI better than doctors or is it not? And technically, the human doctors lost. AI was more precise and more empathetic and more caring than most doctors. That's kind of scary. Does it mean that they can replace doctors? No, not exactly. We just have to find out how they can complement us so we can double down on our strengths and we can find complementary robots. So if there's a job that requires information in and out, then that is ready to be replaced. Definitely. But if it includes also social skills, that's a bit more difficult. But if it also includes motor skills and also a combination of all three of them, that's much more complicated. Because writing a prescription based on the symptoms, that's not complicated. Knowledge is enough. But changing bandage for a little kid, well, that's much more difficult. AI is not going to replace that. So what we should be teaching leaders now to prepare for the future, that is the practical question that Jacob Morgan asked 140 top CEOs and 14,000 employees. He came up with 4 mindsets and 5 skills, and I changed the names a little bit to make them more descriptive. That was growth mindset, teamwork, inclusion, global mindset, coaching, innovation, communication, self-awareness, and technology. As you can see that 8 out of the 9 skills and mindsets are directly linked to how much you understand yourself and others. People skills are not soft. They are not optional. That was just an unfortunate label from the 60s when the American psychologists had to distinguish between the skills needed to use the guns and deal with people. There's nothing soft about people skills. 8 out of 9. That's how important that is. People skills are business skills. But if I know that people skills are so important, which is the best solution? It's a logical question. So let's go. In less than a second, you find more than 3 billion results. You click on any of them, and they all claim they're the best thing in the world. You're lucky to work with them. They work with everyone in the world. Then you look at the results. How's it possible that the results do not reflect that? How come employee engagement is worse than during pandemic? What might be the reason? Clearly, it's not working. And one of the main reasons is this, that often the evaluation is based on, I love your workshop. That's a good feedback. That's not a result. A result is measurable. A result is transparent. If you want to entertain people, fantastic. As a dopamine hit, it's really good, but that's not a result. Was it entertaining or was it valuable? How do you know? Very simple question. And there is an answer to it. Because real experts can provide results. They can measure it. They can diagnose the issues so they can offer a solution. Offering solution without diagnosis is the exact opposite of expert advice. They are partners in the US. This is a Fortune 500 company, the global leadership team. As you can see, they scored really low on psychological safety and motivation. So can you imagine how they were motivating other people? That's not easy. That was the starting point. After 3 months, they were here. It's measurable. Psychological safety improved, motivation improved. Not everything. Sometimes it was a bit polarized, sometimes it was more tension, but results are transparent. If they are not measurable, they are not results. This is what experts do. It's not about entertainment, it's about valuable content and improving people. I don't know if you remember in 2004, there was a huge tsunami in the Indian Ocean. There was a girl, Sally Smith. She was from the UK, 10 years old. And just 2 weeks prior to the holiday, they learned about the tsunami. And then she recognized the symptoms. And she said, look, that's going to be a problem. Tsunami is coming. The water is really frothy, and then you can see that square shape. And the parents didn't listen to her at all. They were ignoring her, but she was panicking. And there was an English-speaking Japanese man who understood the conversation and said, yes, I know, there was an earthquake somewhere close. And then suddenly everybody started running and they got away from it. That was probably the only beach where there was no death. And 230,000 people died in one of the biggest natural disasters, except for that. Because she saw the signs, but a lot of people were ignoring it, or they didn't recognize it. And this webinar is very similar to this. All the signs are there, but only the smart ones are going to act, and they are going to get away with it. The ones who ignore it, probably they are going to be taken out. Just like during the pandemic. I remember how many people were talking about growth mindset and, oh, we are the experts. Pandemic hit, they disappeared. Why is that? Now you can practice what you preach. It's really easy to stand out when everything is bad. But they disappeared. So what we are going to talk about today is not about telling you what to think. It's about sharing the insights. And this is something that we developed for the last 10 years. So we work with universities, Fortune 500 companies. We have more than 200 licensed partners in 50 countries. And it's not about the industry. As long as your success depends on how well you understand individuals, how much you can tap into that collective intelligence, we can do a lot. It's all about the people skills. Guessing is not an option when it comes to success and your future. Based on our research, there are 3 main reasons why companies are risking their future while investing a fortune in trying to save it. There is budget, there is need, there are no results, or at least not positive ones. So there's something called the dark triad of future risking solutions. So once you have a label, it's much easier to identify a solution. So you recognize them. One of the members is outdated and disconnected solutions. Guess and hope-based solutions. Feel good, but make no difference solutions. I'm going to show you exactly what they are. So the first one is outdated and disconnected solutions, optimizing something that shouldn't exist anymore. And this is what Adam Grant said in the last book, that most of the management models that we are using today were created by people who were born in the 19th century after the American Civil War. The world was completely different, and different challenges require new solutions. It's a no-brainer. Most of those models were designed for the challenges of the 50s and 60s. Today, it's completely different. That time, less than 17% of the value was created by humans. They were seen as a cost to contain. Today, more than 90% of the value is created by humans. So how could we use the same methodologies when the world is completely different? Very simple question. Would you take your Cybertruck to a blacksmith to fix it? What if the blacksmith is really passionate about the topic and he just keeps posting about it on LinkedIn? That's his passion. Don't do it. If they don't have the skills and expertise, why would you do that? Passion is not enough. If you can match your passion with science and tools, that's a whole new story. That is expert level. Passion on its own is not enough. The second member of the triad, guess and hope-based solutions. So this is when we solve a problem that is not the real issue, because it's really hard to optimize something we cannot see. So going back to the previous example, if you asked all those companies, is your solution useful or entertaining? Then probably they would say off the chart, both of them, it's just a gift. Then you check reality and you realize they are barely entertaining and hardly useful. And this is what research shows. The MIT Sloan Management Review 2024. They wanted to understand why the leadership programs are failing the US market and the market in general. And they realized that, first of all of those programs were evaluated based on the amount of information and entertainment they provided. Nobody measured the impact on the team, the people who mattered the most. Nobody tracked the trajectory of the leaders. And sometimes they even made decisions based on packaging. It was almost like a corporate Tinder profile. It's a good investment, yes, for the training companies because they have to sell what they have, not necessarily what the clients need. But you saw the statistic. Engagement is going down, burnout is going up. Those are real people who are suffering. Those are all real people. That's why I find this article. For example, Baibashig, our partner, did a white paper 2 years ago, interviewing companies in the UK, ranging from startups all the way up to enterprise level companies. And they identified the different challenges of hybrid environment in terms of employee engagement. And the result was that only 30% of companies collected some kind of data about employee engagement, and 0% measured psychological safety and inclusion. Zero. Dependent on the size of the company, the problems and solutions were pretty much the same. But what's most interesting is that companies waste a lot of money on employee engagement programs. Let's give people a spa treatment, yoga classes. They're going to love it. But then if you look at the actual research behind it, when they analyzed more than 90 interventions, only one had a slightly positive impact, volunteer work, nothing else. So do you entertain or engage employees? The data is absolutely clear. You can entertain them, but don't expect engagement. So that is about solving a problem that is not the real issue. We can guess, but if you identify the root cause, then you can address that and you get exponentially better results. So if you look at the third member, feels good, but makes no different solutions. This is where we mistake familiarity and price with its effectiveness. Growth mindset, people love it. People claim they have it. But even according to Carol Dweck, who coined the term, she said, you can have off-the-chart growth mindset, but if your environment is not psychologically safe, it's not nurturing, it has zero benefit. That's kind of heartbreaking because that toxicity is going to drown people. And that's why we cannot ignore the power of the environment. We need to create it. We have to unlock that potential. Otherwise, it is lost. So what is the right environment then? That's the question. What are the ingredients? How do you create it? So this is the update that went viral on LinkedIn. It had more than 700,000 views and a lot of people commented on it because it hit a nerve. That even though the problem is crystal clear, even the solution is kind of crystal clear, you have people in the middle. And people can be the greatest asset or liability, depending on how much they understand themselves and others, and how much you can influence them. That's where the projects fail. 70% of transformations fail because of that. So what can we do? The first ingredient is psychological safety. A really important topic now. A lot of people talk about it, but as soon as you ask them, how do you actually measure it so you can optimize it? There is silence. But it's not a new topic. In 1788, the Chimney Sweeper Act was introduced in the UK because people got really angry when they realized that the minimum age to become a chimney sweeper apprentice was 4 years old. Can you imagine that today? 4 years old baby, go up on the roof, clean the chimney, go, go, go. No, they got really angry and they realized that the employer has a duty of care. So it took around 250 years, and now, at least officially, we have the same health and safety standards in most countries. But recently, they added a fifth category, the psychosocial one, because they realized that an attack on our psychological safety can cause more damage than a broken bone or a slap in the face. But because it's invisible, it's hard to prove it. It's insanely difficult to optimize it. But also Google wanted to understand what is the secret of high-performing teams. First idea, we don't need leaders. It turned out it's a very bad idea. You need leaders, but good ones. And they realized that the number one trait of high-performing teams is psychological safety. It's proven beyond doubt. So very simple question. Where is your team? And how do you know? Where is your team before the training? Where is your team after that? If this is the number one trait of high-performing teams. What's the point in employing smart people if they don't feel safe enough to speak up? Or if they don't feel motivated to speak up? Because that is the second invisible force. But how do you motivate people? Daniel Pink has a really interesting take on the topic. He talks about the evolution of motivation. 1.0 is very primal. Make babies, survive. That's more than enough. But if we have to work with people and we have to interact, then we need more than that. We have to tap into the extrinsic motivators, the pain and pleasure principle, the carrot and the stick principle. The problem with that is that people get used to everything. You have to punish and reward people more and more to get the same result. And also what research shows is that when it comes to creativity, strategy, it backfires. Not that it doesn't work, but it backfires. So that's why we have to upgrade it to motivation 3.0, the intrinsic motivation. This is the one that is coming from inside. Like Chris Voss said, the FBI negotiator, there's no such thing as logical, only what matters to someone. So once you understand what people need in your team, then you can connect your message to their highest needs and values. And this is when you can influence them. That's when people can motivate themselves. But for that, you also need to know them. So if a team scores high on psychological safety and motivation, they would be in the growth zone. That's a wonderful place. If they are lacking both, that's the apathy zone. It's not ideal. In the anxiety zone, companies can still make money because people are motivated, but they don't feel safe. They burn out really quickly. And comfort zone sounds good, but it's not if you are a business because nothing grows there. A business is not a family. You don't put your kids on furlough if there's no money. A business is a high-performing team, which means they have to be psychologically safe and motivated. You have standards. So there's a problem with the numbers because sometimes the numbers can lie, especially averages, or at least they can hide the truth. Because maybe that's your team as an average. It's not too bad. You are in the growth zone. We could walk away. But when we look at the individuals, then you realize that the team is polarized. Within the same environment, some people are like fish in the water, others feel rejected and demotivated. And according to Amy Edmondson, the goddess of psychological safety, even if you have one outlier, it can affect performance by 30 or 40%. So it doesn't really matter whose fault it is. It is everybody's responsibility because it affects everybody. So far, psychological safety and motivation were fluffy topics, be nice to people because it's invisible. But as soon as you can quantify it, you can measure it, you can visualize it, it becomes real. When the clients can hold a report and they can see the team composition. When you can visualize the team dynamics, it becomes real. And there are plenty of case studies. Some of them are not great. For example, we work with an oil and gas company in Scandinavia, including the CEO. They were in the apathy zone. During our program, one of the refineries burned down because the lack of psychological safety and motivation manifested itself in different levels of health and safety. And that's not a good idea when you deal with oil and gas. But on a positive note, we have the best case studies in Indonesia, the biggest mining company there. Before the program, they had 17 accidents a week. After 6 months, they had 0. We turned psychological safety into physical safety, and they won some of the most prestigious awards in the health and safety sector. It is that important. It's proven beyond doubt. But if you really want to take it to the next level, you want to reach the highest level of growth, you have to tap into cognitive diversity. We don't really talk about it a lot, but this is the immune system of a team. This is the only layer that has proven benefit in terms of performance. The issue is that often we rely on common sense and good intention, and we think that it's enough to make it work. That's not exactly the case. For example, 86% of leaders think that they are outstanding, they are truly inspirational. But 82% of employees think they're not. Does it mean they are not good? No. They might try their best. Intention is good. Impact is negative. That's the problem with courses like inclusive behaviors. The leaders attend it and they think that they are so inclusive. But how do you know? Have you checked the impact? Did you ask your team? Because if they don't feel included, you are not inclusive. It's that simple. But they might think that they are. And that's the danger. Or 93% of leaders think that they are excellent communicators. 91% of workers think they are lacking basic communication skills. Are they delusional or something else is going on? But there is a blueprint, and it's not based on common sense and good intention. So I'm going to share 3 different scenarios and tell me which one is the most relevant in your life, which is the one that you experienced as an employee, or leader, or consultant. How would you rank it? Option 1, you have a leader who employs a lot of different looking people who think the same way. Looking different, thinking the same way. Not much cognitive diversity, lots of agreement. Option 2, now you have a lot of people who look different and think differently, so you have cognitive diversity, but they are clashing constantly. There's no benefit at all. Option 3, you have a lot of different looking people who also think differently, but the leader is really bad. The leader is dominant. So people learn, don't speak up, don't say anything, conform to the norms, that is it. And that's how we lose the power of diversity. How would you rank it in the chat? 1, 2, or 3? So first one, different looking people who think the same way. Individually very smart, collectively blind. Option 2, they think differently, but they're just clashing. Bloodbath. Option 3, bad leader. Too dominant. Nobody can speak up. No ideas. How would you rank it? 1? Yeah, 1. So far, 1 is the most popular one, to be honest. We scan hundreds of teams, and often it is very scary how similar those people are. 3? It's really interesting to see the patterns, and most of the case studies are 1. That is called homophilic diversity. I know it sounds like a disease, but it just means that we like and trust people who are similar to us. And that is one of the strongest forces in team dynamics. Why would you hang out with people who disagree with you, who are different pace? You don't need that hassle in your life. So often we surround ourselves with people who are similar to us. For example, this one, 10 senior leaders from 8 different countries. On the surface, very diverse. Cognitive diversity, 22%. So if you look at the sliding scales as a range of perspectives, then all the 10 people are standing within this range. That's kind of scary. So that's the problem, that they agree, it feels right, it doesn't make it true, because their blind spot is 78%. That is huge. We can all agree that the earth is flat. It doesn't make it flat. But why would I talk to someone who doesn't agree with me? But that's exactly why cognitive diversity is the immune system of a team. So based on how your team scores on these forces, where is your team? Stage 1, growth zone, scoring high on all 3 of them. Time bomb, which is stage 2, when you have a problem with one of the invisible forces. Is it decline, when you have problems with 2 of the forces? Or is it game over, when you score low on all 3 of them? Where is your team? How do you know? That's the question. Very simple questions. And 99% of leaders cannot answer it. They just guess what the problem is and they find a solution. You saw the result of that. That's the problem with that. So what are the right skills then? What do we need to create that right environment and unlock its potential? What is cultural intelligence to you? Maybe if you put it in the chat. What do you mean by cultural intelligence? Why do you think it's important, if it is? Adapting to different cultures? Yes. Now the question is, what do we mean by culture? To understand the other side of the story. Very practical. Sensitivity to others' values. Yes. Being able to understand another perspective and bridge it. Way of life. Very practical. So clearly it's an important topic and it's very much needed. Sometimes the challenge is that we use the same word, but we have very different definitions and they create very different expectations. So let's go deeper. So technically there are 2 main approaches to understanding people. One is solutions, explaining what is normal and expected in a country. Technically, we could call them international solutions. And the reason is that more than 80% of cultural differences exist within countries, not between them. And we all belong to 15 or 20 cultural groups at the same time. To make it more interesting, according to research, the poorest container of culture is country of origin, gender, and generation. Meaning that based on these categories, you cannot predict an individual's values and beliefs. That has nothing to do with science, nothing. Even horoscope is more useful. You cannot create a high-performing team based on passports. You cannot. I know that some models claim it, but that's not true. If you move to a country, then yes, it makes sense to learn about what is normal and expected. For global mobility, it can be useful. But if your success depends on how well you understand an individual, it can be truly misleading. Because more than 80% of cultural differences exist within countries, which is a good news, because that means that we also have more experience than we realize. But that also means that every single dialogue is a cross-cultural conversation. Every single team is multicultural, even if it's not international. And that's really important. We had a really interesting case study, big German company. They employed a lot of Brazilian engineers. We had to create a high-performing team. So of course we can start with the Brazilian and German approach. Big difference, obviously. But then when they completed the assessments, it turned out that the Brazilian engineers were much more German inside than most Germans. And for them, that was a psychological permission to be themselves. So instead of highlighting statistically average national differences that do not even exist on individual level to widen the gap, it was based on data. We created a common ground, and then they learned how to make the most of it. They even left Brazil because it was too messy for them. And that makes sense. You don't choose your gender, generation, or country of origin. But even if you are completely different, you learn how to navigate efficiently in that environment. Culture is not who we are, it's what we are used to. That's a big difference. Of course, it shapes us. But statistically, at least 70% of the people are not average. They are not like fish in water. And at least 20 or 30% of them are the exact opposite of what we would expect. The other approach to understanding people is psychometric models. And sometimes people get crazy about it and they have their favorite one, and then, everything is based on that. But it's limited. And here's the reason. Imagine that you psychometrically profile a sunflower and you know everything about this flower. You know everything. But where do you plant it? In the snow? You stick it in the desert, maybe in the middle of jungle, or in the right environment. Depending on where you put it, you will get a very different result. We don't exist in isolation. We have to understand the power of environment, because your personality determines how you want to behave, but your environment or culture determines how you have to behave. So, it's nice to talk about, oh, I'm green, oh, you blue. Okay, what happened? Nothing. We managed to widen the gap. And often people use psychometric assessments as an excuse. And they manage to widen the gap even more, instead of using it as a starting point to push their boundaries, to become more flexible. That's not what happens. We cannot separate it. We have to understand the power of the environment. And anyway, even if we put very different people in a team, most of them would conform to certain norms, so you cannot see that anyway. That's another challenge. This is where global disc is important. Sometimes people think that it's a combination of the psychometric and the intercultural field. It's not. It's about removing the illusion of separation. It was always connected. It's the same vocabulary and frame of reference across all personalities and cultures to make the process as uncomplicated and practical as possible. Intercultural intelligence is not about international knowledge. That's way beyond that. The problem is when we overcomplicate something, then people are not going to use it. So how can we give people one platform, one operating system, and many applications? As opposed to the standard disk that measures behavior in certain situations, it goes into the three different layers of the identity. What you do, how, and most importantly, why. Because 95% of our actions are driven by values and beliefs we are not even aware of. But we think that we are so logical and objective. That is just not true. And once I understand those underlying values and drivers, I can measure the mindset gap between me and my environment. Because everything is relative. It's not even about the absolute score. I can measure the mindset gap between me and another person. If you are brave enough, you can use it with couples. The underlying concept is exactly the same. It's hard to talk about something you're not aware of. We can only talk about the symptoms. We can only explain what we know. But when we use it for leadership development, we can measure the mindset gap between the leader and the team. So they understand why it's so difficult to motivate people, why they try harder and then they get worse results. No more guessing, but measuring what matters. So how can you unlock the potential then? How can we create the right environment? Before I tell you that, let's talk about expertise, because there are different levels. Nowadays, everybody can be whatever they claim to be: a thought leader, an evangelist, a guru. And often they use the same title as you and me, but they don't have the same expertise. And the clients don't get the same result. But their perception is their reality. So once they have a framework, they can make a better decision. So level one is the fake experts. They are the ones who use important topics for virtual signaling. I'm passionate about psychological safety. They don't even believe in it, but they use it as a marketing tool. That's not good. Level two, experts who present. So these are the people who have some kind of knowledge. They even believe in the topic, and they have maybe one or two workshops and they can talk about the topic, but they don't have tools, have the level of expertise needed. And then you have experts who research. They have something because they are really knowledgeable. But the main difference is that they don't want to share the spotlight. They want to be the hero that slays the dragon. It's not about fixing something, but I want to be the hero. You have to use my solution. So maybe I'm not that passionate about the topic. But if you want the highest level, these are the experts who make things better. They are up to date. They have tools, they have expertise, and they want to share the spotlight. They want to create synergy because they realize that when they share the spotlight, then it's not about less attention on them, but much more attention on the topic itself. That's how we can make progress. Because alone, probably we are not enough. And that's why we have to focus on data-driven solutions. That's a whole new level. No more guessing, but measuring. So what is the cost of investing in the wrong type of expert? And this is something that a lot of companies are doing. You saw the statistics. Those statistics are available. Anybody can look them up. Anybody can do that. But do they do that? No, they rarely zoom out to see that whatever they invest in, is it working or is it not? So that's why I do this webinar every single month. So people can look at it, they can think about it, they can go back and they can ask better questions so they can make better decisions. That is the goal. Because we know that leaders are really important. Around 70% of employee engagement depends on the leaders. So obviously, they spend a lot on leadership development. Last year in the US, $6.8 billion were spent. Fantastic news for the companies, not the people who spend the money. You saw the statistics. The situation got worse. It's back to the level where it was more than 10 years ago. And also, can you imagine the people who haven't left? How much damage they cause to the companies? And that's one thing. But if they are upset, they go home upset as well. And that is going to affect their families. And I'm pretty sure that most of you experience that. It's not fair on anyone. It's unethical. But often training companies need to sell what they have, not what the clients need. And they still pretend that just because something was working 50, 60 years ago, it is still great. No, it's not. So when it comes to AI, there is a bright side because it can help us. If something is repetitive or it's about information, then it's easy. That's not a problem. It can give you really good feedback. It can process things. Fantastic. But the dark side of the AI is exactly where the potential lies. This is exactly where we can double down. Because AI is not going to create inspiring leaders and high-performing teams, but it can contribute to their growth or decline. It can create more stress because employees in survivor mode are less inclusive. They are not collaborative. In a hybrid environment, it's more difficult to improve culture. How do you do that? AI is not going to do that. And leaders, whatever worked in the past, probably is not working anymore. And they are often scared. Am I losing control? Am I becoming irrelevant? Maybe I'm not performing, so people just think that I'm buying my time before retirement. A lot of leaders experience this. They are scared of this. But that's exactly where we have to focus on. And technically, there are three steps. First, let's address the three reasons why engagement is plummeting as sharply as burnout is skyrocketing. Let's catch the dark triad. Now you have a label, you can notice it. Go back and check what you invested in. Does it qualify for this? Because some programs qualify for all three of them. They are the darkest ones. Step two, create the right environment, which is high on psychological safety, motivation, and cognitive diversity. That's where you have the highest level of growth. And then you can also develop the skills that unlock its potential. And also using up-to-date solutions, data-driven ones. You measure it first, then visualize it, then you can optimize it so you can grow. You cannot skip the first two because offering a solution without diagnosis is the opposite of expert advice. And real people are suffering. And this is what we do within ICQ, for example. We have programs for beginners, leaders, the 4 stages of growth. This is for leaders who want to go beyond just talking about psychological safety. A company can go through, they can send all their leaders, we can do it internally, and they have the right skills to create the right environment. Talking about psychological safety is not going to fix it. And then the Impactful Leader Program. This is for senior leaders, data-driven, getting into the cognitive and behavioral disruptors, giving them all the tools to take leadership to the highest level, to future-proof their companies. And for teams, this is the kind of program that in a Fortune 200 company resulted in 400% better results than any previous programs. It works, but the leader was extremely committed. But we can measure the impact, we know where we start, and also it has to be sustainable. So depending on how we want to work with people or they want to partner, it can be intelligence on tap. If you need a workshop, you need coaching, you get it. You want to scale expertise, we can work with your HR people or L&D professionals. And also sustainable growth. We can hand back the keys. We can certify in-house HR and L&D leaders. You have all the expertise. You don't depend on external consultants. You can carry on with the work. That is real sustainability. And if you are a coach or consultant and you want to do this ICF accredited program to become a data-driven executive coach and leadership coach, we can do that. We have more than 200 partners now in 50 countries working with some outstanding companies. There is no traffic jam there. If you just would like to read about the topic, there are a lot of Forbes articles. For example, Amy Edmondson shared one of our articles on LinkedIn that's about one of our case studies in Canada in the healthcare industry, which was very nice of her. And the last thing, that this is the other post that went viral on LinkedIn. It had more than 1 million views because, again, it hit a nerve. Because people realize that data without stories are powerless, nothing. But stories without data are just noise. But if you combine both stories with data, then you can create engagement. You can fuel growth. This is when magic happens. And the ultimate goal is to create data-driven, meaningful conversations rooted in science. Nothing can replace that. And political correctness is not going to help with that because that just prevents people from talking about sensitive topics. So if you give people the vocabulary and the frame of reference, then you can facilitate the journey. There is no shortcut.